I stood in the kitchen, the aroma of brewed coffee hanging in the air, when Arthur's words sliced through the calm like a knife. "Evelyn, we've decided to live with Ethan and Lisa, so you need to leave." His voice, once warm and loving, now held a chilling finality. I blinked, disbelieving. The room spun slightly as I tried to comprehend his words. Lisa, standing beside him with arms crossed, chimed in with a sneer. "Yeah, it's about time. You've been nothing but a freeloader, Evelyn." A freeloader? Me? The absurdity of it stung. I had been the backbone of this family's finances for years, while Arthur played the role of the struggling artist, and now this? My gaze shifted from Arthur to Lisa, and then back to Arthur. He avoided my eyes, his face an emotionless mask. Anger and disbelief churned in my stomach. "Is this some kind of sick joke?" I asked, my voice shaking. "No joke, Evelyn. We think it's best for everyone," Arthur said, his tone devoid of the warmth I once knew. The man I married, the man I built a life with, was now evicting me from my own home with the help of our son's wife. The absurdity of it all was overwhelming. I wanted to scream, to shout, to make them see the injustice. But all I could muster was a hollow laugh. "You'll regret this," I said, the words coming out colder than I intended. Arthur's eyes finally met mine, but there was no remorse there, just a blank stare. "Just pack your things and go, Evelyn. It's for the best." I looked around the kitchen, the heart of our home where I'd cooked countless meals, where we'd shared so many memories. And now they were casting me out like an unwanted guest. "I'll leave," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "But remember this, Arthur, you'll regret this day." I turned, leaving them standing in the kitchen, and walked to our bedroom. My bedroom, the room where I had spent over 2 decades of my life, now just a hollow reminder of a love that had withered away. I packed a suitcase with clothes and essentials, grabbed my work laptop, bank book, and some valuables, and headed for the door. As I passed the living room, I saw them, sitting together, already erasing my existence from their lives. "You think you've won," I said, pausing at the door, "but this isn't the end. It's just the beginning." Without waiting for a response, I walked out, the door closing behind me with a finality that echoed in my heart. As I drove to a nearby hotel, my mind raced with plans and possibilities. They thought they could discard me, but they were wrong. I was Evelyn Carter, and I would not go down without a fight. This betrayal would not go unpunished. I checked into the hotel and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The events of the day replayed in my mind, fueling a fire within me. They had unleashed something in me, something fierce and unyielding. I would rebuild my life, but not before making sure Arthur and Lisa understood the gravity of their mistake. They had underestimated me, and that was their biggest mistake. As I drifted into a restless sleep, one thought remained clear in my mind. This was not the end, but a new beginning. A beginning where I would take back control of my life and make them rue the day they crossed Evelyn Carter. The night at the hotel was restless, each tick of the clock a reminder of my shattered life. In the dim light of dawn, memories flooded in, bittersweet and sharp. I met Arthur when life was simpler, filled with dreams and possibilities. He was a graphic designer with a creative spark that ignited something in me. Our courtship was a whirlwind, a blend of passion and promise. We married young, and soon Ethan came along, completing our little family. But time has a way of eroding even the strongest foundations. Arthur's once passionate drive for his work dwindled into complacency. I continued working at a food manufacturing company, my career progressing steadily. It was my salary that kept us afloat, especially when Arthur decided to leave his stable job to pursue freelance work. "Are you sure about this, Arthur?" I had asked, concern lacing my words. He was confident, almost dismissive. "I'll get work from my contacts. Plus, you're doing great with your job." My job, which he casually referred to as a side gig, was the lifeline of our finances. His ignorance of my professional worth was a growing wedge between us. It was during this time that Helen, Arthur's mother, became a central part of our lives. Her health was failing, and I found myself taking on the role of her caregiver. It seemed natural. She was family, after all. But Arthur's lack of involvement was a bitter pill to swallow. "Why don't you help more with your mother?" I once asked, frustration evident in my voice. Arthur just shrugged, his attention more on his designs than on my words. It was always about his work, his needs, never about Helen or me. As I lay in the hotel bed, the hurt from years of being undervalued and overlooked simmered within me. They had taken my kindness for weakness, my silence for submission. But no more. I would show them the strength of a woman scorned, a woman who had given her all only to be discarded. My plan began to take shape in the early morning light. It was time for Arthur and Lisa to face the consequences of their actions. They thought they had removed a problem from their lives, but in reality, they had ignited a fire. I would start with Arthur's finances. It was time he learned the true value of the money I brought into our household. I knew his freelance work wasn't as lucrative as he pretended. His pride would crumble under the weight of financial realities. And Lisa, with her smug sense of entitlement, would learn that her actions had repercussions. I remembered her disdain, her condescending words. She had no idea about the struggles and sacrifices I had made for this family. I rose from the bed, a new determination coursing through me. I would not be a victim of their cruelty. I would be the architect of their comeuppance. As the sun rose, casting a warm glow through the window, I felt a sense of empowerment. Evelyn Carter was no longer just a name. It was a symbol of resilience and retribution. They had underestimated me, but they would soon learn the cost of their betrayal. This was not just about revenge, it was about justice. And I would have it, no matter what it took. The first rays of sunlight brought clarity and resolve. I checked out of the hotel with a single goal in mind, to begin my carefully crafted plan of retribution against Arthur and Lisa. Returning home to gather the rest of my belongings was a calculated move. I needed to see Arthur to gauge his reactions to feed the fire of my resolve. The house felt different as I stepped in, colder, unwelcoming. Arthur was in the living room, his back to me, lost in his thoughts. "I've come for the rest of my things," I announced, my voice steady. He turned, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before it settled into an indifferent mask. "Fine. Take whatever you need." As I moved through the house, memories taunted me, but I pushed them aside. This was no time for sentimentality. It was a time for action. In our bedroom, I quickly sorted through our shared life, compartmentalizing emotions, focusing on the task. Clothes, personal items, some documents. I was methodical, leaving no trace of myself behind. Arthur hovered at the doorway, watching. "Evelyn, are you sure about this?" His question was a mix of confusion and a faint hint of concern. It was almost laughable. "You made your choice, Arthur. Now live with it," I replied, without looking at him. I could feel his gaze on me, but I didn't falter. This was the man who had underestimated me, who had pushed me out of my own life. No more. The final item I packed was a photo of us in happier times. I stared at it, a bitter smile on my lips. Then, without a second thought, I left it on the dresser, a reminder of what he had lost. As I carried my belongings to the car, Arthur's voice stopped me. "Evelyn, about the finances." I turned, meeting his eyes. "What about them? We might need to discuss how we'll handle things moving forward." "Oh, now you're concerned about finances?" My voice was tinged with sarcasm. "Don't worry, Arthur. You'll manage. After all, I was just a side gig, remember?" His expression faltered, guilt and realization dawning. But it was too late for regrets. I drove away without looking back, the chapter of Arthur and me firmly closed. But this was just the beginning. My mind raced with plans, each more satisfying than the last. I knew Arthur's weaknesses, his pride, his finances, his superficial understanding of my contributions. I would use these to my advantage. He would learn the hard way the value of what he had so callously discarded. And Lisa, her arrogance, would be her downfall. I would make sure of it. She thought she could step into my life, take my place without consequence. She was sorely mistaken. I found a small apartment, a temporary refuge, as I plotted my next moves. It was modest but sufficient for my needs. As I unpacked, the reality of my situation sank in. I was alone, but I was also free. Free to rebuild, free to exact revenge, free to be the woman I was meant to be. That night, as I lay in bed in my new apartment, I felt a surge of empowerment. They had pushed me to the edge, but I had emerged stronger, more determined. Evelyn Carter would no longer be a victim. She would be a force to be reckoned with. Settled in my new apartment, I strategized my next moves. The first step was to confront the financial facade Arthur had constructed. It was time he faced the reality of our situation, the reality he so conveniently ignored. I started by securing my financial assets. I transferred my savings to a new account, ensuring Arthur had no access. This was my hard-earned money, and I would not let him squander it any longer. Next, I prepared for the inevitable legal battle. I contacted a lawyer, someone known for their tenacity and success in divorce cases. As I explained my situation, the lawyer nodded, understanding the gravity of my case. "We'll make sure you get what you deserve, Mrs. Carter," she assured me, her voice firm and confident. I felt a sense of relief, knowing I had a professional in my corner. This wasn't just about money, it was about justice. A few days later, I received a call from Arthur. His voice was strained, a hint of desperation creeping in. "Evelyn, we need to talk about the divorce and the finances." I agreed to meet, curious to see how he would handle this confrontation. We met at a quiet cafe, a neutral ground for what was to be a decisive discussion. Arthur looked worn, the stress of the situation clearly taking its toll. "Evelyn, I think we rushed into this. Maybe we can work things out?" His plea was pathetic, a stark contrast to the confident man I once knew. "Work things out? You threw me out, Arthur. You made your choice." He flinched at my words, but I felt no sympathy. This was the bed he had made. "We can't afford a divorce, Evelyn, not with my financial situation." "Oh, now you admit it," I retorted, my voice laced with scorn. "You're finally facing reality." Arthur's eyes darted around the cafe, his pride wounded. I thought we could come to an agreement, without lawyers." I leaned in, my gaze steady. "You want an agreement? Fine. I want $10,000. That's my price for an amicable divorce." Arthur's face paled. "10,000? I don't have that kind of money." "That's not my problem, Arthur. You wanted me out. You pay the price." He struggled for words, his facade crumbling. I'll see what I can do." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "You have 1 week, Arthur. 1 week to give me what I'm owed." As I left the cafe, I could feel Arthur's eyes on me, but I didn't look back. This was more than just a financial transaction. It was a statement. I was no longer the woman he could manipulate and discard. Back in my apartment, I allowed myself a small smile. The tables were turning. Arthur was finally understanding the cost of his betrayal. And this was just the beginning. There was more to come, and I would make sure he paid every penny of the emotional debt he owed me. The week after confronting Arthur was a whirlwind of activity. I found solace in action, each step a move towards reclaiming my life. But the true test came when Arthur called to arrange the exchange of the $10,000. We met at the same cafe, a public space where emotions couldn't easily run amok. Arthur was there first, looking more defeated than ever. He handed me an envelope, his hand trembling slightly. "This is everything I could gather," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't count the money there. I didn't need to. The look in his eyes told me it was all there. "Consider this the end of our chapter, Arthur." As I turned to leave, I could feel his gaze heavy on my back. But I walked away without hesitation. This was more than a financial transaction. It was a reclaiming of my dignity. Back in my apartment, I counted the money. Each bill was a testament to my resilience, a down payment on my new life. But it wasn't the end of my plan. Not yet. The next step was Ethan and Lisa. Arthur's betrayal was one thing, but their complicity stung deeper. It was time they faced their own consequences. A few days later, the opportunity presented itself. Ethan called, his voice strained. "Mom, we need to talk. Can you come over?" I agreed, curious about what prompted his sudden request. At their house, the atmosphere was tense. Ethan fidgeted nervously, while Lisa's usual arrogance was replaced by unease. "What's this about, Ethan?" I asked, my tone neutral. "It's about Dad," Ethan began, his eyes avoiding mine. "He's in a bad place, financially. We might lose the house." Lisa chimed in, her voice laced with frustration. "And it's your fault with that ridiculous demand for money." My heart hardened at her words. "My fault? I was thrown out of my own home, Lisa. Did you expect me to just walk away without anything?" "But we're family," Ethan interjected, a note of desperation in his voice. "Family?" I scoffed. "Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me." Lisa's face reddened, her facade crumbling. "Well, what do you expect us to do now? You've taken everything." I stood, my resolve unshaken. "You expect sympathy from me? You made your choices. Now, live with them." As I left, I could hear them arguing, their voices a mix of blame and regret. But it was too late for apologies. They had shown their true colors, and now they were facing the consequences. In the solitude of my apartment, I reflected on the day's events. I had set out to reclaim my dignity, to make them understand the pain they had caused, and I had succeeded. But as I lay in bed that night, a sense of emptiness crept in. Revenge had brought satisfaction, yes, but it hadn't filled the void left by my shattered family. Yet I knew there was no going back. This was my path now, and I had to see it through to the end. As the days passed, my life settled into a new rhythm, one defined by independence and strength. Yet, the final act of my plan remained. It was time to expose Arthur and Lisa's true nature, to bring their deceit into the light. I began by digging into Arthur's financial affairs. It wasn't difficult. His desperation had made him careless. I discovered a trail of debt, poor investments, and most shockingly, evidence of an affair. It was the ammunition I needed. I confronted Arthur once more, this time at his office. It was a place where he felt in control, but I was about to shatter that illusion. "Arthur, we need to talk," I said, my voice calm yet assertive as I entered his office. He looked up, surprise etched on his face. "Evelyn, what are you doing here?" "I know about the affair, Arthur, and the debts," I stated, watching as his face drained of color. That's ridiculous," he stammered, but the guilt in his eyes betrayed him. "Don't insult my intelligence. I have proof," I countered, my words sharp. Arthur sank into his chair, the facade of confidence crumbling. "Evelyn, please, let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about. You've made your bed, now lie in it." My words were cold, a reflection of the void he had left in my heart. I left his office, leaving him to stew in his guilt and fear. But my plan wasn't complete. Lisa was next. I invited her for coffee, a public setting where she couldn't easily escape. When she arrived, her usual brashness was absent, replaced by caution. "Evelyn, what is this about?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. "It's about you and Arthur," I said, meeting her gaze. "Your role in this whole mess." Lisa shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, but you do," I countered. "You encouraged Arthur's decisions, thinking it would benefit you. But now, you're just as responsible for the fallout." Lisa's facade cracked, her composure slipping. "You can't blame me for everything." "I can, and I do. You were part of this, Lisa. You can't escape that," I replied, my voice steady. Lisa looked away, unable to meet my gaze. She knew the truth, even if she couldn't admit it. As I left the cafe, I felt a sense of closure. I had exposed their deceit, their selfishness. They were left to face the consequences of their actions, just as I had faced mine. In the days that followed, the fallout from my revelations hit hard. Arthur's affair became public knowledge, his reputation tarnished. Lisa, caught in the crossfire, faced her own set of challenges. Her marriage with Ethan strained under the weight of the truth. I watched from a distance, my heart heavy yet vindicated. They had underestimated me, but I had shown them the strength of my resolve. Yet, in the quiet moments, I couldn't help but wonder if the price of revenge was too high. I had regained my dignity, but at what cost? The family I once loved was now broken, a casualty of the war I had waged. In the weeks following my confrontation with Arthur and Lisa, the repercussions of their actions, and mine, began to unfold in full view. The house that once echoed with our laughter now stood as a silent monument to broken dreams and betrayal. Arthur's career suffered greatly from the scandal. His clients left, unwilling to associate with a man whose personal life was in shambles. His financial troubles, once hidden behind a veil of pride, were now laid bare for all to see. Lisa, on the other hand, found herself isolated. Her marriage with Ethan strained to the breaking point, as the truth of her manipulation and greed surfaced. The social circles that once welcomed her now turned their backs, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions alone. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Ethan had moved out, unable to cope with the continuous quarrels and the stark reality of their situation. Lisa, once so full of confidence and disdain, was now a shadow of her former self. And then there was Arthur. He called me one evening, his voice a mixture of sorrow and desperation. "Evelyn, I'm sorry. For everything." His apology, though late, was a testament to the depth of his downfall. "Your sorry can't undo what's been done, Arthur." I know I've made mistakes, but I'm paying for them now," he said, his voice breaking. "You're not the only one paying, Arthur. We all are," I replied, the weight of our collective pain heavy in my voice. We ended the call with no promises of reconciliation, only the somber acknowledgement of our shared history and its painful end. In the aftermath, I found solace in my newfound independence. The pain of the past was still there, a dull ache that ebbed and flowed with the days. But there was also a sense of freedom, a liberation from the chains of a loveless marriage and the suffocating deceit that had come with it. As I rebuilt my life piece by piece, I realized that revenge, though sweet, was also bittersweet. It had given me closure, yes, but at a cost. The family I had once cherished was now just a memory, a lesson learned in the hardest way possible. But life has a way of moving forward, and so did I. I found joy in small things, in the quiet moments of solitude, in the new beginnings that each day brought. The scars of the past remained, but they no longer defined me. I was Evelyn Carter, a woman who had faced her demons and emerged stronger. The journey had been long and fraught with pain, but I had survived, and in that survival I had found a new sense of self, a new purpose. As I look back now, I realize that the greatest revenge was not in the downfall of Arthur and Lisa, but in the rise of my own spirit. In the end, I had not just survived, I had thrived.